Hello friends and welcome to the sessions of Kubernetes namespace. So what is a namespace and why we require a namespace to create it in the Kubernetes cluster? Because of some security reasons. So you can see that in the most of the companies following this namespace features provided by the Kubernetes to just create a virtual cluster. So we will going to discuss how to create the namespace, why it's required, and what is the features of namespaces in this particular session. So the quick overview for the sessions which we are covering in this particular slide is about the what is the namespace and its uses, how to create it, and how it provide the extra security means how it's going to secure our objects in the namespace and some of the important topics related with the namespaces. So, regarding the namespaces, Kubernetes support multiple virtual clusters backed by the same physical cluster. Means we have the same physical cluster in which you can create a different namespaces in the same clusters, like one for the QA reason, in which you are just doing some testings, and the objects that related with the QA goes inside the QA namespaces. For the development environment, you have different namespaces, different objects. So in which in this way you can just split the environment as well using the same physical clusters of the Kubernetes. So these virtual clusters are called the namespaces. Namespaces provide a scope for names. Names of resources needs to be unique within the namespace, but not across the namespace. Means that the object's name, you can use the same object name within the different namespaces. Like you created a test pod in the same test pod you can create in the QA namespace also. But within the namespace, you can't use the same name for the objects. It should be unique. Namespace cannot be tested one another, and each Kubernetes resources can only be in one namespace. This is all the similar with the previous one. Namespaces are a way to divide the cluster resources between multiple users. So here in the concept of the securities, like for a particular user, you provided them the permissions to use a particular namespace like the QA. The user is not allowed, that particular user is not allowed to access the productions object. So you can restrict the user using the role and role binding. That way, for that I will make a separate videos in which we are talked about the securities of a particular user, so and the access authorizations, authentications and authorizations related things for a particular user for the particular namespace. Use label to distinguish the resources within the same namespace. You already know that I already already uploaded a video on the labels and selector. You can refer for more details, but the label play a very important role in which you can put a tag on a particular objects that so that you can identify in future that okay, this is the web pod, or this is the database pod, so something like that. When the cluster is first set up, like when you are doing the setup for the Kubernetes clusters, the Kubernetes create a pod and a service for its internal purpose. There are several types of static pods that has been created at the time of creating the Kubernetes clusters, and such as those required by the networking solutions and DNS service, because the master cluster needs to manage all the things. They have the QA API, they have the controller server etcd and kube scheduler, or there are several types of static pods that they create to manage the Kubernetes cluster. So at that time they then just create a new namespace called the kube system, and they put all the cluster core components in the kube using the kube system namespace, and they also tamed it so that by mistake the kube API will not schedule any pod which don't have the toleration. So for the taint intoleration, you can refer my videos that I already uploaded. To isolate this from the users that I already mentioned, and to prevent you from the accidentally deleting and modifying these services, Kubernetes create them under the another namespace created at the cluster setup name kube system. So whenever you do kubectl get pods, whatever the command you written previously without the namespace, you are accessing the default and you creating the objects in the default namespace. So to access the any of the objects that lies in the kube system namespaces, you have to mention this namespaces as well. So you can assign a particular object at the time of creations also, so the definitions file or imperative command that you are using, that you can create a pod in a particular namespace. So if you want to view that particular pod, you also need to put the correct namespace there, otherwise you will not find it, because the default command will execute in the default namespace. And you can change the context as well. I will demonstrate you how to you can move a particular context to the a particular namespace, so that you can just write a simple code and it's fetch all the objects from the productions environment, productions namespaces. Each of the namespaces have its own set of policies that define who can do what. So you can define your policies as per the namespaces, so that you can provide a proper securities of your objects. You can also assign a quota of the resources, like you have the cluster, but you want to allocate not a large resource. You have to manage your resource accordingly for the development environment. You just want to not allocate a large amount of spaces. You don't just want to allocate the largest amount for the production environment, not for the development environment. So you can manage or assign quota for this as per the namespace. So it's guaranteed a certain amount or not more than allowed limit. For the other, it will complain if you create any objects that not lies under the limit. So you can see this is a table for the namespace and its descriptions. The default namespace for the object with no other namespace. So you can see this is the default namespace. So whatever you created initially, it goes into the default namespaces if you are not providing the namespaces in the imperative or in the declarative way. So cube system, the namespace of object created by the cube system, when the cube system build up for the all the required thing, the cluster component goes into the cube system namespace. The cube public, this namespace is created automatically when you create the Kubernetes cluster and is readable by all the user. You can refer these namespaces for all the objects that has been created. It contains the informations like the CA, something like the certificate related things, the Kubernetes, the kubeadm join, adding the worker node, the master node. So it's contain all the things related with the authentication of the worker nodes. The cube node release namespace contain the lease objects that are used by the kubelet to determine the node health. So it's contain all the informations regarding the node health related things. So here are some commands for the namespace related with the namespace. Like for the imperative way, when you try to create a namespace, you just write kubectl create, or you can write the namespace in a full string, or you can. This is a short code. NS stand for the namespace and the name of the namespace. Like I use the prod. And or you can use in the declarative way for the different with using the definitions files and API version, the VI, and the kind. The case should be small. It's mistake. I written it in capital. And the namespace and the metadata, the name of the namespace you can provide. So kubectl get pod. I'm just trying to get all the pods from the namespace, like a dash and stand for the namespace and the cube system I'm using. So it will get all the pods from a particular namespace, that is cube system. kubectl run test pod image that I am using the nginx, and the namespace is prod. So it will create a pod which name is test pod with the image nginx in a prod namespace, not in the default, because I already mentioned here the prod namespace. kubectl create -f pod definitions file I am using. The pod definition file don't have any namespace related, but you can add it, and this is the good practice to if you want to deploy a particular pod in a prod or any other namespace, you just mention it in the pod definition file. Like I am mentioning, I am not mentioned in the pod definition file. I am using it in a imperative way, and this is not a recommended or good practice. So whenever you are decided that this pod will go into the production namespace, prod namespace, you have to mention in the pod definition file, not use in an imperative way, because it's not keep the history. So for the version controlling, you need to follow this method to just mention the namespace related in the pod definition file, not using the imperative, which I just mentioned here. kubectl get all. So I'm just mentioning here the prod. Okay, so it will get all the objects from the prod namespace. So all the objects mean the service, the deployment, the replica set, the pod, or it will get all from the prod namespace. kubectl get pod, so it will get the only the pod from the prod namespace. And for the definitions file, when you created the definition file to create the prod namespace, you can apply it using this command kubectl apply -f for the, and here you have to mention the file name, the YAML file. Okay, the kubectl API resources and dash namespace is equal to true. So it will fetch all the objects which have the dependency for the namespace, like the pod. When you create a pod, and provide the namespace, it will create it in a namespaces that we already mentioned. So it will list all the object. This command will list all the object which is which have the namespace true, means which object have the impact due to namespace. So you have to mention the namespace each time, either the creations or fetching the information. So namespace true, it will fetch all the objects. And like I mentioned that this is the command kubectl config set context current, and you have to provide the namespace. When you do use a command, it will fetch all the objects from the default namespace. This is the default feature, but sometimes the user are working only for the production environment, and they do not want to mention each time the namespace related thing in the query. So they can switch, means they can use this command to switch from the default to the namespace. So they will, when they will write kubectl get pod, it will fetch all the pods from the production in namespace, because they set the context from the default to the prod. So in this after running this query, the context is set for the namespace, so that they, when they write the simple command, it will fetch all the objects from the productions. They not need to mention the namespace related things all the time, but for the default they have to again put the namespace term, because now the context it set the context for the namespace as a prod. Okay. Okay, now I am jumping to the lab sessions to understand the namespace related things, the concept in a better way, so that I can demonstrate all the things by executing the commands. And one more thing, if you would like my videos, just subscribe to my channel and click on the bell icon so that you can get the notifications whenever I upload the video. Now I'm jumping to the lab session. Okay, let's monitor the environment first. kubectl get pod. So we don't have any pod. kubectl get deployment. We don't have any deployment. So what about the nodes? kubectl get node. We have only one node. Okay. Now, basically, we are concerned about the namespaces. kubectl get ns. I'm using the short code ns for namespace. So, as I mentioned, we have the four namespaces. Suppose I'm going to create one pod. So, I'm not going to define any namespace, and let's see kubectl get or get no, run, and the name of the pod is just default. Image that I am going to use is equal to and then x. Okay, so this pod is get created kubectl get pod. Okay, it's currently creating, and now I'm using the namespace. Now I'm using the namespace called default. So I'm getting the same result either we use the default or without default, because the context is set for the default namespace currently. So now I'm going to create a new namespace using the imperative way. So declarative way I already provided you in the slides, so you can refer. But for the environment, for the working environment in which we are working, so it's better to use all the things in the definition file, not use the imperative way. This is only for the examinations, because we have some time constraint in the examination and we have to perform the activity fastly. So in the exam only we can use the imperative, but for the organization in which you are working, please follow to create a definitions file for all the things. kubectl create ns, and the name of ns, suppose I say pod. So now one namespace gets created. Now clear the screen. kubectl get ns. So you can see that I just created one prod namespaces in the same Kubernetes cluster. This is the, you can see the virtual cluster it's created. So we can now create any of the objects that related to the production. So in the label kind of things, now we don't have to add the prod, because we already know that all the objects that has been created in the prod namespace belongs to the prod environment. So you can put the label like this is related with the web, this is related with the application server, this is related with the notification server, this is related with the database, something like that. So you can split in this way. You don't have to mention the prod, because now we created a virtual cluster for the production environment to that, so that all the objects that belongs to the prod namespaces belongs to the prod environment automatically. This is clear. So now creating kubectl run, and this is the pod that I'm creating test in the prod. Okay, so I name it in this way. Image that I'm going to use the same image engine X, and the namespace I'm going to use is the prod one. So you can see the prod pod get created in the prod namespace. Now I just want to look into it. CTL get pod. So you can see that I'm not getting the pod informations that I created in the prod namespace, because it's fetching all the informations from the default namespaces, and I created the test pod in the prod namespace. So I have to mention here the namespace as well, because the current context is set for the default one, the prod. Okay, so you can see that pod that I created in the prod namespace is fetched and it's working fine. So this will put some restrictions to the users, so that they can not delete any objects eventually, and also we can not allow any users that is not appropriate for the environment. to fetch the objects related from the prod environment. If some new joinees and they don't have the complete knowledge of the environment, so we can allow them to pay in for the development namespace, not for the prod. So we can restrict in this way. And for the role and role binding, the cluster role and cluster binding, I will add another session on this. And now I'm going to execute some other code. kubectl get all. So I'm getting all the objects, and now let's see what will happen. So it's automatically have the namespace for the default one. So I have to mention the namespaces here, so that it get all the informations from the prod what we have. So I created only one, so it will get only one thing objects, because I didn't created any other objects in the prod environment. So in this way you can use these types of command to get the informations of the objects passing the correct namespaces. Now clear the screen. One important thing that I just want to show you guys: kubectl API resources and the namespaces is equal to true. So it will list all the objects which have the dependency with the namespaces. Like you can see the pod. If we create any objects that is related with the pod, if we need to provide the namespace, if we not provide, it will put it into the namespace which is currently set. Like by default, it's set for the default one, so it will create the. When we create pods in the particular namespace, we have to fetch the objects information by passing the correct namespaces. So you can see that all the objects is dependent on the namespace. You can say the daemon sets, we have the dependency. If it created in a particular namespace, you have to pass the informations correctly so that it can fetch all the information. So deployment, replica sets, all are, you can say, the namespace to have the true. You can see that here also namespace is true. In the similar way, you can see the objects which don't have the bonding with the namespace. So when you create it, you don't have to pass the namespace related things. So you can just put a flag of false here. So it will list all the things like namespace, definitely in the namespace. And one more thing, that you can't create a namespace inside a namespace. So this types of thing is not supported, and also this is not a good practice. So you can see the nodes. If you create a nodes, you don't have to provide. It's not get created in a particular namespaces. You don't have to need to provide the persistence volume. You can see that the persistence volume claim is dependent on the namespace, but the persistence volume, this is very important, that these questions may be asked in the interview, that either it's a namespace or not. So sometimes in the exam, maybe you have to the question says that create a persistence volume in a particular namespace. So this is not a good thing, and they might be added in the just confused you, because the persistence volume will not created in a namespace. It's not dependent on the namespace. So you can say the namespace flag is set as false. So you can see all the things like cluster roles. The roles is dependent with the namespaces, but the cluster not, because it's just have the flag of false, so it's not dependent on the namespace. You can find the roles. A role will be dependent on this. So you can see all the informations for this. And one more thing I just want to demonstrate to change the namespace related things. Like currently I am in the default one. Now if I want to see the pod, because I'm a user which have authorized to work on the only on the prod, so I don't want to add each time the namespace related things to look for the objects. I just want to move from the default to the prod namespace. So in this way we can set it. Kubectl config. I'm doing the config, set context, and the whatever the current we have, so we can making it as a current, and we require the namespace informations. So I am passing here the namespace is equal to prod. So you can see the context is now modified. So whenever I do a query, kubectl get prod. So it fetch the informations from the prod, not from the default, like I named it as a test prod. So you can understand that now whatever the query I will write, it's getting all the informations from the prod. And if we want to fetch the prod or any other objects that belongs to the default, we have to mention it here, like get prod. And now we are doing something in the reverse related reverse order. You can say that previously we have the default, now we have the prod. So fetching all the objects from the default, I have to write the default name. So you can see that for the fetching all the objects from the default namespace, I'm mentioning the default namespace. But because currently we set a context and currently we are using the namespace as prod. So that's it, guys, and I will keep on adding the Kubernetes sessions, and I really appreciate that you like my videos, and I am receiving several comments and several questions, and keep on increasing the subscribers and views. And please watch my videos completely so that you can have the better understanding. And soon I am going to release another videos on Kubernetes topic and the CKA questions challenge as well. So keep watching. And one more thing, I created one DevOps related things in which I just did the setup of the Jenkins in the EC2s, and soon I am going to install the Git and Maven, and I'm using another EC2 machines for the Tomcat installation, and I will trying to integrate it so that whenever any code changes in the Git repository, so it will monitor Jenkins will monitor for the changes, and it will do a deployment in another server. So we just I'm just providing you the sessions on that as well. So soon I am going to release a video on that as well. I will try to build an image also in the Docker environment. That is I will create in separate machines, and I will try to create image and fetch and do the deployment in the Kubernetes instance as well, in which I will demonstrate you that how to create a Kubernetes cluster on their EC2 machine, so that whenever I commit a code in the Git repository, the Jenkins will trigger it to Ansible environment, and Ansible have the Ansible playbook that will create an image to the Docker Hub, and from the Kubernetes which is installed in the separate machine, have the deployment definitions file which is triggered by the Ansible, and it's fetching the image informations from the Docker Hub. So you can see that for the DevOps related stuff, this is the very good sessions that I am thinking to create on it. And you can see we are building a CI/CD pipeline in next. And the further sessions, for which I created one new playlist called DevOps Miscellaneous Topics. So please watch that playlist also. It will be very helpful to get knowledge on the CI/CD pipeline. So if you guys like my video, just subscribe and share it with your friends as well, and click on the like button as well, so that it's good for me to get motivated and keep on doing such activity, creating new videos, and put some comments if you have any concern. I will try to answer, and I answered all the questions till date, because I don't want if any user put a comment, it's keep on unanswered. So thank you guys for watching this video, and keep learning, and have a nice day.